all. Bills can win it here. White puts it down. The kick is on the way, and it is good. And the Bills have won it. The Bills have won it. The Bills have won it. They win it 41-38. Incredible. What a comeback by the Bills.
Jacksonville's perfect record on the line right here.
They put in Williams as the fullback, and he scores a touchdown, the 12th year defensive tackle.
And the fans are all over the field. Incredible. This place is pandemonium.
Welcome to a special episode of Disguise Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am Anthony, your host here on Disguise Coverage. Find Disguise Coverage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, pretty much anywhere and everywhere you will find podcasting content. You will find Disguise Coverage. While you're there checking out Disguise Coverage, check out all the great array of Cover One content in regards to the Buffalo Bills. You've got the Hoof Podcast with Sterling, Anthony Romeo, and Eric B. You've got the Cover One Buffalo podcast with Greg and Aaron. You've got the Film Room on YouTube with Eric Turner, the godfather of Cover One. We've got you covered every day. Bills content, Bills analysis, everything that Cover One is about. I, again, am Anthony, your host here on Disguise Coverage. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. If follows are not your thing, I will also accept pounds of vibranium and or preferably adamantium because it's more precious and it's sturdier. Again, a follow or vibranium or adamantium, pick your poison. I'm fine with any. I mentioned in that little intro there that this is a special episode. It's special, one, because it is the episode that is about to send us into Wild Card Weekend for the Buffalo Bills, which I guess has lost its luster a little bit because the Bills have become somewhat of a playoff regularity over the last several years. But it's even more of a special episode this week because I have a guest again on this episode, as we've had the last several weeks here on Disguise Coverage. And there's a lot of content creators in the Bills content community. There's a lot of podcasts and people that give you thoughts and hot takes and analysis and opinions. And for me personally, there are few that I genuinely respect and hold in high regard and whose opinions and analysis are ones that I look to, not just to support or buttress my own thoughts and opinions, but to strengthen my knowledge of the Bills and knowledge of the game. A lot of those guys make up the Cover One team, but another one is my guest here on tonight's episode, Bruce Nolan from the Bruce Exclusive podcast on Buffalo Rumblings. Bruce, thank you for coming aboard. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's a party all the time. Just disco balls, dancers, the whole thing, man. It's 2021. We're gonna roll this year. It's gonna be great. It's not gonna be anything like last year. I'm sure it's gonna be fantastic.
Everything's changed. I mean, yeah, we're like a couple days in, like a first weekend to 2021. Nothing bad has happened. Everything in the country is stable and great.
It's December 38th, Anthony.
I like what you did there, and I hope people get what you did there. Well played. Well played. It is, because 2020 continues to be terrible. But I guess for the Bills, it's been good. That's
Absolutely.
That's a shining beacon.
Yeah,
that's a shining beacon. You will take it. I'll take it too. It's been years and years of just middling mediocrity and failure as a Bills fan and as someone who loves the Bills. And as we go into the playoffs here, it's even weird. I find myself, so I thought of this idea for this episode, like talking about, okay, the Buffalo Bills, why not us? Reasons for potentially being able to win the Super Bowl, reasons that could potentially hold us back and all those things. And then I pitched it to you and you were gracious enough to accept and come aboard. And then I started I sat there and legitimately thought to myself, I was like, it's crazy that 4 years ago, I was sitting here thinking, man, I hope we get a better coach after Rex Ryan, and I hope we have some organizational stability, and we still need a quarterback. And now we're sitting here and we're going to legitimately have a discussion as to why the Buffalo Bills could potentially win the Super Bowl here in 2020. And it's just that's a wild turnaround in such a short period of time.
It really is. And it's funny, everything that we do in life, we do it with a semblance of hope. hope drives much of human action throughout history. You go to work in hopes that you're going to get there okay. You're going to perform your job to a reasonable degree. You're going to make it there safely. You're going to be able to get home. You're going to get your paycheck on Friday or whenever it is you get paid. And you do these things every single aspect of your life with a semblance of hope. And the thing that was interesting about the Bills for so many years is that they were never bad enough to give you hope, and they were never good enough to give you hope. Oh. And so that pendulum swings. If you think about it this way, it's almost like an inverted parabolic curve, right? Like a bell curve. So if you think about it, inverted parabolic curve, right? So you have an inverted bell curve. If you're really, really bad, if you think about it like a line graph, if you're really, really bad, there's a high amount of hope, because with that comes organizational turnover, number one overall pick, things like that. And if you're really, really good, that gives you hope because there's a ring. And then in the middle, there's this big old dip, the valley of despair in this bell curve, right? And that's where the Bills were for so long, that they didn't really ever get bad enough for you to have Jacksonville Jaguars 2021 level of hope, where everything's new. You got Trevor Lawrence potentially coming in. You got a new head coach, all that stuff like that. The worst that they got was the year of Cam Newton and Marcel Darius, which was an absolutely terrible quarterback class. And Cam Newton went number one overall. And we know, of course, that Buddy Nix was a big Cam Newton guy, and he probably would have picked Cam Newton if he would have been there at number 3 to the Bills.
Had he not had like this amazing pro day that made everyone go, oh, you know what? He could be the first pick. And then we were just like, all right, cool. I guess Cam's going to go number 1 and Von Miller's going to go number 2.
Yeah. And then you picked Marcel Darius, and he was a good player for the Bills. And then you had the murderer's row of Jake Locker, Blaine Gabbert, and Christian Ponder.
I still couldn't believe that. I liked Locker at Washington, and he went early, and I was just like, oh no, that's too early for Jake Locker, let alone the rest of the murderer's row.
Yeah, Christian Ponder was the one for me. I was like, what now? And I thought Christian Ponder was like a mid-day 2 pick. Yeah. And I was like, okay, all right. And then, of course, just like every single one of these quarterbacks, they have these small flashes where they give their franchise hope. But that goes back around to what we're talking about. Hope. Hope comes with these young quarterbacks. And as the Bills, they went from, we had J.P. Lossman for a brief second, and that was a promise of a first-year quarterback, right? First-round quarterback. And then when Drew Bledsoe says, I don't want to be a backup, especially to J.P., you're like, what does he know that I don't? And all of a sudden your hope gets extinguished again. And so that's you ended up, great comment here from Tim in the comments saying disagree to extent because they consistently won games they shouldn't have in the drought, leading to lots of false hope. Now, I will say that for a lot of us, that amount of hope wasn't real, and we knew that. So I didn't think Tyrod Taylor was the guy.
Right.
I thought that the ceiling for Tyrod Taylor was still a reasonable game manager. And so the ceiling for Trent Edwards, how often do you have these mid to late round picks end up being a stud? And that's what we do in Bills Mafia. We have these late picks that we just gravitate towards, whether it's Antonio Williams as an undrafted free agent, or whether it's Duke Williams, or whether it's any of these other late round picks that we think this could be the one, but the probability is they're not. For every person who ends up being Fred Jackson, there's someone who ends up not being Fred Jackson.
Yep.
And so the probabilities, for those of us who care about the probabilities, that doesn't really give us a lot of hope. And so it was a struggle during this time because everything we do in life is built around hope, and we just didn't have it. And now we do, because you have a pick a guy who was picked. Josh Allen was picked for his ceiling. Yes. It was picked for the things he could become, right? And now you're seeing that. There is no greater hope for a Bills fandom. There's no greater hope for sports fandom, I would argue, than a quarterback who is scratching his ceiling or is getting close to it. No better hope than that. So as we kind of have a discussion about hope, that's why we should be here. That's why we should have hope. It's not just because the team's good. It's because the thing that has a significant impact on making the team good is good.
Whew. That was an excellent cherry on top for that. It's just, you hit on so many points from the drought era and those times of just being not good enough to be really good, but not bad enough to really truly restart and rebuild, and just being this middling 6-10 to 8-8, this kind of like every year being like, man, if these 3 games or 2 games could have gone the other way, we could have been in the playoffs. If only we hadn't have choked away this one game or these 2 games, we could be in the playoffs. And now we sit here live on Thursday night, 2 days from now, the Buffalo Bills will be playing in the wild card against the Indianapolis Colts. And to a pretty heavy degree for analysts and pundits, not just within Bills Mafia, but across the nation and varying media outlets, the Buffalo Bills are a favorite in this game. And they come into this game just rolling. They look like a juggernaut. They're being referred to as a juggernaut by multiple people offensively. And then the defense has stepped up. And we get the joy of being able to sit here and having some of that hope finally being tangible and real, and then adding more hope onto it, combined with a little bit of like actual results and actual things that we can touch and see and feel, metaphorically, and being able to go forward now into this game and into this playoff run. And you and I get to sit here and have this conversation, much like many Bills fans and analysts may be able to have this conversation and be like, you know what? Is a Super Bowl possible? Can we do this? Like, and it's not just like farcical or ridiculous to be like, come on, we can't have this. This isn't the drought breaking playoff run where it was like, you know, we could beat Jacksonville, but I mean, if it does, it doesn't really matter. We're just kind of happy to be here. Even last year, beating Houston, I thought was doable. I thought we could be one of the final 4 teams in the AFC, but I wasn't sitting there thinking like, well, you know, we can make a run at this thing. Was there a chance? Perhaps, but it wasn't one that you thought was sustainable or a regular occurrence that you thought or you saw in a lot of people's minds. But this year, as you and I are about to go into, it's a different thing. We can talk about a Bills Super Bowl berth and a potential Bills Super Bowl win, and it's not ridiculous. It's not out of left field. It's pretty grounded in realism because of how they've performed this year. And it's just such a stark turnaround and contrast to what they've been for the last, gajillion years, ever since I've really developed my fandom, and I'm sure yours as well.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen teams win the Super Bowl with weird outlier years, you know, with quarterbacks who were middling, who got hot, Eli Manning, Joe Flacco, with game managing quarterbacks like Peyton Manning, when he won a Super Bowl with the Broncos at that point in his career, was a game manager, you know, and with Brad Johnson and with Trent Dilfer. But when you deal with probabilities, and I talk a lot about probabilities on my podcast, because football is not a game of yeses and nos. It's not a game of nevers and alwayses. It's a game of probabilities. And the probability is that the teams who are going to win the Super Bowl are going to have good quarterback play. And that's the reason we can talk about it. We can talk about it because Josh Allen's playing Super Bowl caliber football.
We also have a good quarterback.
Yeah, we have a good quarterback. So when you have elite quarterback play, you have a shot winning the Super Bowl. It's that simple. Any team that has elite quarterback play has a shot at winning the Super Bowl. And that's the reason why it's so important to get your guy. So last year, I don't think last year was elite quarterback level play from Josh Allen. I don't think his first year was elite quarterback level play. And I don't think when we made the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor, he was elite level quarterback play. And those things are correlative to being able to make a run at a Super Bowl.
Yes.
And so, like you said, we were just happy to be there in 17. And in 19, you know, if Josh Allen would have gotten hot and gone on a run, we could have had something, right? But he hadn't, at that point in his career, in my opinion, played Super Bowl level quarterbacking.
The probability of that was low.
Right. And now he is. This team was winning for the first couple weeks of this year almost entirely due to Josh Allen in the passing game, because he wasn't getting help from the defense and he wasn't getting help with the running game. So you know we can do it against good teams. The Los Angeles Rams are a good team. And Josh Allen and the passing game pretty much won the game by themselves. Yeah. So when you have a player who's capable of doing that, you've got a shot.
And we do have a shot. We have that guy. Oh, you got me excited. Let's jump right into it. If you're watching live or watching the video, you're going to see the graphic change. Reasons for a Bills Super Bowl. So Bruce and I are going to give our top 2 reasons each as to why the Buffalo Bills can make a run at the Super Bowl here in the 2020-2021 season. Bruce, you are the guest. You have the honor of going first.
The first reason that they can win a Super Bowl is well-roundedness. The Bills can win a Super Bowl at this point because they are not playing a similar level of football that they were playing earlier in the year that I just described, when Josh Allen and the passing game were essentially winning games for them. The defense is starting to round into form. And I think it's interesting when we keep talking about the Bills defense rounding into form that it just so happens to coincide with our linebackers getting healthy. I don't think that's unusual. It's so funny. You know, we said that Sean McDermott had a linebacker-centric defense since the day he was hired. We talked about it ad nauseum when they drafted Tremaine Edmonds, that he was going to be, you know, quote unquote, the next great Sean McDermott linebacker, because apparently Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis were really, really good, and they were good enough to sink into our consciousness as Bills fans. And so we do that. And then the second our linebackers get banged up and the defense starts not playing well, we start grasping at other things. Like, oh gosh, Ed Oliver's a bust. He's too small. Oh, when, you know, Mario Addison is a joke. We should have re-signed Shaq Lawson. Where's Jordan Phillips? I need Jordan Phillips up in my life right now.
Oh, God.
Well, hold on. We said this was a linebacker-centric defense, and now the linebackers are banged up and the defense isn't playing well. Sometimes the simplest solution is actually the highest probability of being accurate. Occam's razor. Occam's razor, philosophical concept saying the simplest solution has the highest probability of being accurate when presented with multiple solutions. I love to use Occam's razor. Some people use that as the KISS concept. Keep it simple, stupid. So if you have a linebacker-centric defense and your linebackers are currently A.J. Klein, you might not potentially be getting the best version of that defense. So the fact that the linebackers have been healthy and have been rounding into form with this defense is significant. They can win the game with Josh Allen playing well, like they did the first 4 weeks, but those were fairly close margins of victory against Miami, against the Rams. They were close games that were being won by the offense. Now, all of a sudden, if you get that same level of offensive play and the defense starts rounding into form, now you get blowouts, which is what you've gotten the last couple of weeks from this Bills team. So well-roundedness is the first reason why the Buffalo Bills have a shot to win. There's no question it's a passing team, and that's where their bread is buttered. However, they can still play defense, and that's important. You get good special teams. You have good specialists now, which hasn't been the case for the last couple of years. You have a good returner. You have good special teams coverage units. This is a well-rounded team. Well-rounded teams have the higher probability of winning the Super Bowl because you might be faced with a game where you have to win it in different ways. And the more well-rounded you are, the more capable you are of doing it.
So I mentioned briefly in the beginning that you have a similar thought process to mine. I may have mentioned this offline when you and I were chatting before the episode started. So your number one reason there is my number two. The balance and complementary football that the Bills have been able to play as of late. Again, to your point, the offense has set the world on fire. And in the beginning of the year, the offense was winning us almost everything. And again, to your point, with the linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds being hurt, Milano being out, especially in this Bills defense, this iteration where there's really only two linebackers because our base defense is basically a nickel defense. Those two are hurt. It impacts how we do almost everything on defense. The defense isn't playing up to par. But as we've gone through the back half and the back stretch of this year, the defense has been so good. The last 9 games, the Buffalo Bills defense is 6th in yards per game. They're 6th in points per game. They finished the year 3rd in takeaways. And then special teams, to your point, the Bills currently right now are 4th in special teams DVOA. They're 2nd in weighted DVOA, which takes more recency into account. So they've been better even more so as of late. They are 4th in punt return yards per punt return. They're 1st in kick return yards per return. And then they're 3rd in yards per kick return allowed. Offense, we know the drill. We know Josh Allen is having an MVP type year, and he potentially could win it, but Aaron Rodgers has had such a ridiculous year that you got to think Aaron Rodgers is going to get it. But regardless, Allen has had an MVP type season, which is amazing. We know Stephon Diggs has led the league in receptions and yards. We know that Cole Beasley has had the most receiving yards out of the slot, and we know the complementary pieces on offense for the weapons and the line and all these types of things. But the defense has been so good down the stretch, and the special teams have been so good all year. And exactly to your point, I've been looking at this entire year at Kansas City I think rightfully so, as being the favorite to win the Super Bowl again, because there is very little drop off between their best unit and their worst unit. Their offense is their best unit. We know that. We know Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Kelsey and their whole squad, but their defense is not so much worse that it's a vulnerability or it's a massive problem. Is it a great defense? I wouldn't say so, but they're good enough to not bring down your holistic average too much. Their defense is good enough to be complementary to that offense, and same with their special teams. And the Bills now, what we've seen down the stretch, exactly to your point, and exactly what I'm getting at here as well, it's no longer, well, the offense is carrying everybody, and we just kind of got to hope that the defense can just duct tape things together and not be leaky and not be terrible. We're seeing the Bills offense operate at about a 9 out of 10, and we're seeing the defense operate recently at about a 7 out of 10. And then the special teams all year has been about an 8 out of 10. So when you go for your 3 phases, your holistic football team, your worst unit for the Bills, again, I'm using worse or not as good as a loose term, because the defense isn't as good as the offense. But that's now because the offense is it's just up there so much, and the defense has risen their game. The drop off between our best unit and our worst unit is so small now. And exactly to your point, if you are a complete football team, you can be one-dimensional, and you could be a great run team or a great offensive team or a great passing offense or a historically great defense. And there's a chance you can win a ring, but you need to be good in all 3 phases. And the Bills right now are good in all 3 phases to a tremendous degree. Oof.
Absolutely. I mean,
I like that.
It's
That has me excited.
It's one of those things where you almost have to pinch yourself, because I feel like there were years during the drought where the Bills defense was good, but the offense wasn't.
Yes.
And then there was years where the offense was good and the defense wasn't.
We had those Drew Bledsoe years, like the one year they were the best offense, and then we had terrible defense, and then we had a great defense, and Drew Bledsoe on the offense couldn't do anything.
And it seemed to happen on a dime. Like a couple years after a historic offense and a terrible defense, we had a great defense and a terrible offense. And the Jim Schwartz defense that was so good with a cold front, and we just couldn't get enough points. And it just never seemed to click. And I think part of the reason that it never seemed to click is that there was never really as good of a plan as there is now. If I can go as far as to say there really wasn't much of a process. That's right. Take a shot. So because there wasn't a process, there wasn't this idea that we want to make sure that everything is melding together at the same time. We don't want to constantly be playing whack-a-mole with our squads. Yep. And okay, well, we got taken care of that problem. Now this other problem popped up. And the way that Brandon Beane has layered contracts has allowed this to happen. The way that he has specifically made decisions, it's not just about making the right decisions. It's about making them at the right time. Most of life is about timing. Mm-hmm. Most people in life end up getting married. The timing of you getting married, it changes a lot of your trajectory of life. A lot of people end up having kids. The timing of you having kids changes a lot about your trajectory of your life. It's the same way with building a franchise. You want to pick a quarterback when you can support a quarterback. Yes. You want to get your weapons when you can get your weapons. You don't want to go all in on Sammy Watkins when you don't know if EJ Manuel's the guy, but you do want to go all in on Stephon Diggs when you think you've seen significant growth from Josh Allen and go, hey, I think we can do this. Let's go make a run at this. It's not just about what you do. It's about when you do it. And that's how we arrived at this stage.
Ooh, that's a really great way to put it. You cannot bolster something that isn't really capable of being bolstered. And not to rag on the Jets or to make a Jets comparison, Darnold and Allen and that whole draft class are going to be forever linked to some degree. And we have just seen the opposite in terms of their development. Sam Darnold, I don't think it's a crazy, ridiculous statement to say that he was the more quote-unquote NFL or pro-ready quarterback. He had a little more polish to his game. He wasn't as raw as Josh Allen, but he went into a situation that wasn't conducive to development for a rookie or a young quarterback in terms of the offensive line, in terms of the weaponry that he had, in terms of the coaching, for as much as we joke and rag on Adam Gase. And then you look at the opposite with Josh Allen, and especially in today's NFL where we've seen a lot of teams that have been successful and won rings, except for the Patriots, are doing it on that model of get yourself a good young QB, surround him with talent on his rookie contract while you can still afford supporting pieces around him on offense and defense, support him as best you can, and then take yourself to a Super Bowl and hopefully win one. And the Bills, to your point, with what Beane has done and how McDermott has coached up this team, they're following in the footsteps of that model of getting a good young guy, supporting him because you know, okay, this is the guy. All we need to do is get X and Y and B and we'll be fine. And if you're not developing them properly, not surrounding them, you're going to falter and you're going to honestly potentially ruin someone's career like we may have seen with Sam Darnold, who was a good prospect coming out and just hasn't gotten the support and help that he's needed from the Jets. And now he's floundering in obscurity and the Jets are sitting there at the top of the draft this year and they might be taking another quarterback. And who knows, honestly, how that's going to come out, because again, you have to start that process of surrounding and developing and going for the right thing. Because again, to your point, timing is everything. The Bills knew they had something in Josh Allen, and they struck while the iron was hot this offseason. They got Stephon Diggs. They got Cole Beasley and John Brown the year before. They did everything they could to increase the odds of that timing being correct. And now we sit here on the verge of the playoffs talking about a potential Bills Super Bowl.
And that's important to note when put in contrast with what the Broncos did with Drew Lock. So the Broncos surrounded Drew Lock with talent, and the Bills surrounded Josh Allen with talent. It's not equal. We talked about this a lot on the Bruce exclusive and my pods leading up to the 2019 free agency period. And we talked about isolating the variable. If this is an equation and you understand that Josh Allen is a variable, what you want to do is isolate him. You don't want to put a developing player and make them reliant on developing players. Too many moving parts. So while the Broncos went out and drafted, albeit talented, rookies, they're still young players who are trying to gel with young players who are trying to gel with young players. You have not isolated the variable because you have developing players who are now relying on developing players to develop. And that's not what you want.
No.
Instead, you want stable, you want known commodities so that you can isolate the variable, which is Josh Allen. So you go out and you get veteran receivers like John Brown and Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs. So you don't have a developing quarterback around developing skill position players. You've just increased your level of variance. And if you have to make a call on a quarterback in his first couple years, you want the least amount of variance possible. And what you've done when you draft Justin Jefferson or when you draft Jerry Jeudy and then KJ Hamler and then, Noah Fant and Albert O, is you've injected more talent, but you've also injected more variance into the equation. So now you're like, okay, Jerry Jeudy, he struggled a little bit this year. And did Jerry Jeudy struggle or did Drew Lock struggle with Jerry Jeudy? And
Variance.
did Drew Lock struggle because Jerry Jeudy struggled, or did Jerry Jeudy struggle because Drew Lock struggled? I don't. And you've introduced a lot of variance, and the Bills didn't do that. They isolated the variable with Josh Allen. I think that people are going to learn lessons from watching what the Bills did, but I'm not sure they're going to learn the right lessons. They're going to say, yeah, okay, we surrounded him with talent. Yes, but it's the right type of talent. It's specifically the right level of talent at the right time in order for you to understand what you have in Josh Allen. We need to know what we have. And to do that, we need a stable surrounding group. Justin, thank you. I appreciate that. This is a fake podcast voice, just so you know. If you ever met me in real life, you would not recognize my voice. This is not what I sound like. But it is important that we understand that it wasn't just surrounding him with talent. It was surrounding him with the right talent at the right time.
Exactly. That's so well put. You cannot surround a developing player with more developing players because you've just added to that variance, and you can't isolate that person or that development you're trying to isolate by taking Allen and surrounding him with known commodities and proven talent and proven players. Then you can really see, okay, how is Josh Allen really doing? That's a tremendous analogy with that. I think so many people were high on Drew Lock coming into this year because it was like, oh my God, he's surrounded by Hamler. He has such great speed. And oh my God, Jerry Jeudy could already be one of the best route runners in the entire NFL as a rookie. And Noah Fant's coming into his second year. And oh my goodness. But then you were really sitting there. Even Cortland Sutton is good as well, but he's young. And I don't think people took into account that, yeah, you're adding talent, but you're still adding players that need to adjust and get ready and get into a mindset both as a player on the field and off the field, and you don't even know where their game is going to go. And it's the same with Drew Lock. You're surrounding development with more development puts you in a boat, exactly to your example. Like, is Judy struggling because Locke is struggling, or is Locke struggling because Judy's struggling? And that's something you don't want, because as much as you can in sports, although it's hard, you want as much definitive proof or answers as possible so you can know, okay, this guy's not the answer. We got to move on from this guy. The worst thing that you can have is to be caught in between and sitting there wondering, did Locke struggle because Judy struggled, or did Judy struggle because Locke struggled, is almost the equivalent of being 6-10 or 7-9 every year and not being good enough to get it done, but not being bad enough to restart. You're sitting there just going, well, we kind of need to retool, but what do we need to retool? And it's not a good mix. And thankfully, it's not where the Buffalo Bills are. And we're able to move forward. And we have a guy in Josh Allen that we've identified who is able to take us to that next level that we've seen, hopefully, a regular occurrence of how the Bills have played this year. We're hopefully going to see that as years come. And as we continue in this episode talking about reasons for a Bills Super Bowl, Bruce, why don't you give me your number 2 reason why the Buffalo Bills can win a Super Bowl here in these playoffs?
I mean, it's kind of boring now. I mean, it's Josh Allen. So, I mean, I don't know what else. No, I'm just kidding. I absolutely have something else to say. So when I tier quarterbacks in the offseason, I do my quarterback tiers every offseason. I tier them a little bit differently than other people do. I don't use words like elite or good or great or any of those things. I tier them based on the idea that wins are not a quarterback stat. If you obviously follow me on Twitter, you'll know that that's a, if there's one thing that you're going to see on my tombstone, it's going to be, oh, hey, that guy must've been Bruce Nolan. It's going to say, Bob Smith or whatever my real name is. It's going to say wins are not a quarterback stat right there on my tombstone. But if we understand that wins are not a quarterback stat, then you understand that the quality of a quarterback is determined by how much help you need to give him to achieve the same results. So in order to achieve the same team results, how much help do you have to give them? And that's how I tier quarterbacks. So I tier quarterbacks in the following categories. Can win Super Bowl primarily due to. These are the groups of people who, if you have them on your team, you have a shot. They can be the catalyst of a Super Bowl team if you just give them something, right? Mm-hmm. Give them a little bit of help. Just make sure that you're not actively hindering them and you've got a shot. The next tier is need notable support to win Super Bowl, but can make playoffs primarily due to. So this is if you have this person on your team, you got a shot at the playoffs. If you just help them a little bit, if you don't hinder them, you can make the playoffs. But you're going to have to do a little bit better to make sure you can win the Super Bowl. The next tier is need notable support to make the playoffs. This is where you would find the game managers of the world. These are people who they need to have things that are not necessarily elite, but very good around them to be able to do it. The next tier is need significant support to make the playoffs. These are people who you can have an elite remainder of team and you can win a Super Bowl and make the playoffs with these people. But you need an elite remainder of team. You need a flash in the pan moment where you have an elite remaining 52 and coaching staff to pull it off.
Trent Dilfer with the Ravens.
Trent Dilfer with the Ravens, Brad Johnson with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, things like that.
Beautiful.
And then the final tier is undetermined because sample size is a real thing. And I don't put you on the tiers until there is enough sample size for me to feel good about it. So the reason why this is important is because 2 years ago, Josh Allen was in the undetermined phase. And then last year, I put him in the need notable support to make playoffs phase. Well, now, he's playing in the way that you can win a Super Bowl with this level of play. And not everything has to be perfect. In fact, not everything around him has to be good. It just has to be not actively harming him. And that's a level of quarterback play that gives you a shot. So I understand we've talked about Josh Allen, and we've talked about why him being on the roster and playing as well as he is gives you a shot at winning the Super Bowl. But specifically, I wanted to break that down in the sense that if I'm going to tier the quarterbacks right now, I'm not going to, by the way. I'm going to tier the quarterbacks in the offseason after the totality of data has been accumulated. But when I do that, he's in that top 2 tier right now. That's the way he's playing. And those are people where if you have a good team, you can win a Super Bowl. And so when you have a remainder of team that is good and you have a quarterback who's playing out of his mind right now. I mean, Josh Allen's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL this year. And that's not insanity. That's not pie in the sky. There are lots of metrics that back me up on this. You know, the QB stew that I created as far as the composite that we use with holistic metrics, that's going to rank him in the top 5 in the NFL at the end of the regular season. It's going to happen. So when you have a quarterback who's playing that well, you got a shot.
I want to jump to something right here because it was already in my brain based on your reasoning there, and then some comments that have gone in here. We have one that Josh Allen had a great supporting cast, and we have another one from Ryan Johnson. The Bills will lose if Diggs don't play. My question related to those two things for you, Bruce, is how much of Josh Allen's progression and ascension this year do you credit to the addition and the acquisition of Stephon Diggs?
It matters. It matters, but it matters because it was an answer to a question. It matters a lot more than just the raw addition of a certain stagnant amount of talent. So coming into this year, we have a tendency to kind of move on from narratives real fast. And we forget the narratives that existed only a couple weeks ago. And last year, the big narrative about Josh Allen was, what do you do against single high cover zero and man and pressure? Yes. What do you do? Do you have the horses to be able to separate in the short area against man coverage? And the answer is, yeah, you have Cole Beasley, but Cole Beasley and John Brown by itself is not enough to get you there. You have a rookie Dawson Knox, and you have a quarterback who's still trying to figure it out. Yes. So we know Josh Allen's better now against those looks. Stephon Diggs is a part of that. He is not all of that. He is a part of that. So Josh Allen, based on the other things that he's done, it's not like every time he's beaten those looks this year, the ball has gone to Diggs.
Yes.
That's not the case. If Diggs was the only answer to that question, then sure, let's just go ahead and put the mass majority of Josh Allen's development on Stephon Diggs. But that's not the case. So we acknowledge it's part of it because he assisted Josh Allen in overcoming that book that was on Josh Allen. Because if there is a book on you, you're not a franchise quarterback.
Correct.
If there is one thing that every single team can do to stop you, then you're not a franchise quarterback. Because then every team will just do that thing and you're going to be ineffective. That's just not the way that being a franchise quarterback is. So he needed help in overcoming that. Stephon Diggs helped him overcome that, but he's not all of the reason because Josh Allen is making plays against those looks and against those coverages where the ball's not going to Stephon Diggs. He's beating these things with his arm where previously he was trying to beat it with his legs. And so Stephon Diggs is a part of it. But even if Stephon Diggs didn't play, by the way, I think he's going to play. I think that's very, very,
he was
very
dancing and he was doing all these fun things today.
Yeah, I would be absolutely flabbergasted if he did not play. But even if Stephon Diggs in this hypothetical world did not play, it's not like I would think that suddenly the Colts' game plan would change drastically to go, hey, Stephon Diggs is the reason he's beating single high and cover zero. Let's just go single high and cover zero against him this game because now he doesn't have Diggs, so he'll be lost now. I just don't think that's the case.
I completely agree. I think much to make a parallel with wins not being a QB stat, because I am also a massive proponent of the wins not being a QB stat thing, because I don't think you can holistically attribute a win in a football game given all the coaches and other phases of the ball and all the players, both starters and backups, and everything that goes on in a game. There are so many variables to holistically attribute the win to one player, even if it is a quarterback who basically has, I would say, the highest amount of impact or determinants in a game. But because there's so many factors and moving parts and variables, to holistically attribute the win to one player is ridiculous. And the parallel I want to draw to that is, in this regard, to attribute Josh Allen's development and his success and the reason that he's doing so well, to holistically attribute that to Stephon Diggs, I just think is ridiculous. I think, again, to your point, he deserves credit for it because having the presence of a true number one, especially a number one like Stephon Diggs, because of how he can win and separate in the short and intermediate and get vertical, because of his ability to beat a variety of coverages and his high football IQ, his presence has definitely helped Josh Allen. It makes his workload a little easier, and it opens things up for the offense as a whole. But to attribute Allen's development and to attribute the reason for his success being, well, because they added Stephon Diggs, I just think is a disservice to all of the mechanical work that Allen put in the offseason and how he's changed his ability to throw from multiple platforms and reset his feet and his hips and his arm angle, and just his overall ability to mentally play the quarterback position. For as much as we talk about his mechanics and his accuracy and his deep ball and his throws, his decision-making and his ability to read a defense pre-snap and then post-snap and go through his progressions and make the right decisions, his ability to mentally play the quarterback position has increased so much this season. I would say drastically more than any of even the most optimistic fans anticipated. I shouldn't say that because there were some optimistic fans that thought Josh Allen was the second coming of every great quarterback combined and was going to lead us to 19 straight Super Bowls. But even the most optimistic of analysts didn't see this coming for Josh Allen. And so he has done so much to elevate himself and his game, combined with the play calling and the surrounding talent. And Stephon Diggs has played a large part in that. But to bring it all back full circle, and the question that was already in my brain, and not to, nitpick at the comments that were given there, you can't attribute Josh Allen's success to Stephon Diggs and make comments like, well, if Diggs is out, Josh Allen's done. You can't do that because it takes away everything that Bruce said and what I have said here about how he's elevated his game and his ability to win, and how the book on him has changed and how he's answered that book coming out. And that was a beautiful answer. Also, love seeing the comments continuing to come through. We will try to get to all of them. I always try to do that in every single episode. But as more comments come through, it is harder, but we will try our darndest. So that was Bruce's number 2 reason. And I gave my number 2 reason earlier because my number 2 was Bruce's 1, that balance and that holistic complementary football aspect for the Bills as a whole. My number 1 reason that the Buffalo Bills can win the Super Bowl in these playoffs is their adaptability / their ability to be able to adjust. And it's holistic. It's across the whole team, but I want to focus on that regard in specific with regard to the offense. The Bills as a team offensively, earlier in the year, and as we've progressed, they've shown the ability to adjust week to week and opponent to opponent. Okay, you want to come out and they've shown the ability to beat different things. Okay, you want to come out and play zone coverage against us? That's fine. We can beat it. Oh, you want to come out and play man coverage against us and pass? Cool, we can beat it. Oh, you want to come out and play a dime defense because you want to stop the pass? Okay, we can run when we need to. They've shown the ability early in the year to adjust week to week. What we've seen recently from them as we've progressed through this year is the Bills' offense's ability to adjust on a smaller scale and with more immediacy. So at first it was, well, we can adjust week to week and opponent to opponent. And then it started becoming, well, we can adjust half to half. And then it became, we can adjust quarter to quarter. Now they're at a point where they can almost adjust drive to drive. And the Miami game in week 17 was a perfect microcosm and representation of that. We saw on the first 3 Bills drives, we had an interception and we had a punt and we had a punt. Then we get a touchdown by just exposing the short game against Miami. That first touchdown drive the Bills had, 7 plays, 50 yards, 6 passes, a lot of short stuff over the middle, a lot of short stuff to the outside. So, okay, you get a touchdown, you expose Miami, you work the short game. The next drive, another touchdown for the Bills, 8 plays, 88 yards, all passes, but this time we started to work the middle and the intermediate, and we went deep a little bit, another touchdown drive. Then we get the punt return touchdown, but then we get the ball again, and another offensive touchdown, 4 plays, 75 yards, highlighted by multiple big chunk plays to John Brown. To win in this league, you need to be able to adapt and adjust in a variety of forms. Very rarely do you come out with your regular game plan and everything works out perfect and you never have to adjust, and it's just like, oh man, like everything we planned for happened exactly how we planned. We're great. This is golden. Very, very, very rarely in anything, not just sports, in life, does anything go to plan like that. You need to be able to adjust and adapt. How do you counter someone's counter? When you come out and beat someone with the short pass and someone says, okay, you know what? We got to clamp down on the short pass. Can you then go to the intermediate? Can you go deep? Can you do the things the Bills did against Miami and that they've done throughout the back half of the year and through the year holistically? How do you counterpunch someone's counterpunch. The Bills have shown that they can counter someone's counter, and combined with their ability to self-scout and their ability to course correct, they have this tremendous ability to adapt and be able to adjust. And as you come into the playoffs, again, regular season is fine because you could lose this week, course correct, and figure it out for next week. But in the playoffs, as we all know, it's win or go home. If you lose, you're done. You need to be able to course correct and identify and adapt and put those course corrections into practicality as soon as humanly possible. And to be able to do that from drive to drive and know and anticipate what your opponent is going to do, and then come out with something new to meet that course correction that your defense is doing, that your opposing defense is doing, is just, it's the 4D chess. It's all the jokes of playing chess when someone else is playing checkers. Their ability to counterpunch and counter the counters and adjust and stay adaptable and stay fluid like water, like Bruce Lee said, be like water. The Bills' offense is like that, and it gives me tremendous hope that they can continue to do that because of their ability to adjust with such immediacy and adapt to what their opponent's doing.
I think sometimes when we talk about adjustments, especially on the offensive side of the ball, we think about passing to run and running to pass, like it's a binary. Well, the passing isn't working, so we're going to run, or the run isn't working, so we're going to pass. And there's so many different dynamics involved in that. And I think that those two things have a tendency to create conflict when we talk about things like offensive identity. And you say, well, our offensive identity is passing, and they were shutting down the pass, so we ran. And it's just a really simplistic way of looking at that. And specifically what you talked about, so the Bills came out passing against the Miami Dolphins and did not have a significant amount of success. They didn't just switch to running. They switched to a different kind of passing. It's not just binary flipping the switch, off to on, pass to run. It's specifically about what type of coverages are they running? What are their tendencies? What are they doing that is kind of staying ahead of us? And I've said this before, there's an element of rock, paper, scissors to play calling that people are not comfortable with. They don't like that because it implies that there's certain things that are just doomed. And that's why you get a quarterback like Josh Allen who can make plays off schedule. The reason why people like myself were unnecessarily high on Josh Rosen and lower on Josh Allen, one of the main reasons why is because consistently, we're doing a better job of it now, but consistently we make a mistake of understanding that quarterbacks who look good when everything is going well are not necessarily going to look good when it doesn't. Can you make plays off platform, and can you make plays off script? And even if you have, that's why it's so frustrating to play against someone like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson, because you think to yourself, goodness gracious, he threw rock, I threw paper, and I still lost. And that's why that's so frustrating, because there's multiple ways for you to win. As an offense, you can win by making the adjustments necessary to make sure you're throwing the correct scissors to their paper, or you can sometimes throw the wrong thing. You hear offensive coordinators occasionally say this, man, I made a bad call and he made me look good. When you hear offensive coordinators say, I made the bad call and my quarterback made me look smart, that's what they're talking about. So there's two aspects to that. Can the play caller correctly, not guess isn't the right word, correctly ascertain the right play call for the right time? But also, if it's the wrong call, can you either get out of it at the line of scrimmage as a quarterback or make a play off schedule, which is what the quarterback can do. And that's why the Bills are so dangerous, because they can make adjustments without necessarily going, well, gosh, I guess we got to run now. No, we can still pass. We can just do different types of passing. Therefore, you can stay within the identity of your team while still making adjustments.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I couldn't have summed that up better. Put a little cherry on top. And again, those reasons, again, there is a multitude of reasons why the Bills can potentially win a Super Bowl here in these playoffs. But Bruce and I wanted to give our top two, and I think those were a strong top two. And it's encouraging to hear those reasons and that rationale in going forward with the Bills and seeing what are the reasons and the things that they can hang their hat on in this playoff run that ideally leads to a Super Bowl championship. But now we're going to take a bit of a dark turn, I should say, because the Bills aren't a perfect team and there are no guarantees in anything. So now Bruce and I want to take a peek into what could hold the Bills back from winning a Super Bowl here in these playoffs. And again, I'll pass to you, Bruce, to start. What is your number one reason that could potentially hold the Bills back in these playoffs?
COVID-19 has injected a level of variance and random into the NFL playoffs. The Browns are experiencing that right now. And when you have scenarios like that are partially outside your control, then you have scenarios where at any moment, something can be injected into your plan that is too much for you to overcome. I am a man who loves my contingencies. I'm a man who loves my plan and structure and order. There are certain things that you can plan for, but you can't overcome. You can accommodate for them. The Bills have done that in regards to keeping a quarterback quarantined. But the quarterback who's quarantined is Jake Fromm. All of the things I just said about Josh Allen being able to make plays outside structure, down the field, things like that, none of those things apply to Jake Fromm.
Jake Fromm.
Yes, you can accommodate for those things, but you might not necessarily be able to overcome those things. And so the COVID-19 world that we live in right now injects a level of randomness into the playoffs. There's a very reasonable chance that one of the games this year, if it hasn't already been decided, will be decided in part due to something that happened with COVID-19. And so when you inject a level of randomness, you increase the probability that the best team will not win. That's what you've done. Because already when you have a football that is built on probabilities, not possibilities, and not zeros and hundreds and lights and darks, this is the reason why we say any given Sunday.
Yes.
Because we understand that probabilities are a thing, but improbable things happen all the time. So we get it. But what you've done is we understand that the best team always doesn't win. The best team doesn't win every game. That's not the way it works. The better team loses all the time. But the better team has a higher probability of losing now than they ever have. Because at any given moment, something could swoop in and take the wind directly out of your sails. And so that has to be addressed, not just with the Bills. That has nothing to do with the Bills. That just has to do with the climate that we currently live in and the understanding that something can come in and derail things like this. And so that's a reality of the situation. If it happens, it will be terrible. The Browns are experiencing that right now. Baker Mayfield hasn't thrown a pass all week. And they're about to play in one of the biggest games in Browns franchise recent history.
It sucks.
Against a Steelers team they think they have a reasonable chance of beating because the Steelers are a little bit worse than their record. And so the Browns, who just now broke their drought, are trying to break their next drought the same way we are, which is win a playoff game. And so when you have things like this happen, cosmic randomness is what Steven said. And it's true. It's cosmic randomness. And there already is a bit of that to football. That's one of the reasons why we love football.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why we watch football, not basketball, because the best team in basketball wins a vast majority of the time because they have game series. That's why. When you have one game, anybody can win. When you have 7 games, it's a little bit different. So we already watch it for a level of this cosmic randomness that we like, but there's an aspect of this that we don't like as well.
That's well put. The comments were blowing up with it as soon as you started speaking about it. Yeah, the Cleveland Browns, like they're going to be without their head coach already on Sunday. And then the practice aspect and just that level of variability and cosmic randomness. Well put, Steven, in the chat there. That cosmic randomness was so on point. Yeah, there's just a level of that you can't prepare for, and it throws a wrench into it. But prior to COVID, the cosmic randomness was more just like, oh, we're primarily a passing team. So as long as we don't go somewhere where there's like a terrible wind and snowstorm, we should be good. Like that was cosmic randomness, and it can throw a wrench into your plans. But COVID, yeah, it's another level, and it can strike at any time. And I feel, I'm not a Browns fan and I don't like Baker Mayfield, but I feel for the Browns and their fans to finally get to the playoffs and then to have this fall at your feet. It's just so unfortunate. And as Steven said, yeah, may the football gods smile on the Buffalo Bills. I hope so, Steven. I like that point from you, Bruce. And mine is similar to that. Just the level of, I guess not randomness, but something that could throw a wrench in our plans. My number one is injury. But I want to have a bit of a discussion with you on this because I think obviously the most important, we have several important players on this roster. And I think we could both agree that if Josh Allen were to go down, that is the biggest wrench in the Buffalo Bills plans, correct?
Absolutely.
Cool. But after Josh Allen, there's some tiers in terms of players who are important in terms of who does what and who would have the biggest impact if they were to go down or be out. And I think Stephon Diggs, we talked about it earlier in this, we both think Stephon Diggs is going to play this weekend. Cole Beasley was stretching and warming up today, so potentially trending in the right direction. But there's been so many thoughts about, like, is this guy going to be out? Is that guy going to be out? And the effect that injuries could have. Josh Allen is the hands down number one. But I wanted to know from you, because I've been flip-flopping between who my second and third most important player would be to potentially go down. I have Josh Allen as the number one, which you do as well. I think if Tre'Davious White were to go down as the two, Stephon Diggs is my third most important person going down as the three. I think those would both have significant impacts on the team, especially Tre'Davious White, because in today's NFL, it's a passing league. It's a quarterback-driven league. You need some semblance of pass defense, and having an elite cornerback like Tre'Davious White, especially in the AFC, when you are going to face ideally, potentially the Kansas City Chiefs, because if we face KC, that means we're facing them in the AFC Championship, who have Tyreek Hill and who have Travis Kelce in this tremendous passing offense. And then even if you're playing the Ravens, who aren't a great passing football team, but if you have a great corner who you can leave on an island and trust to lock down some dudes so you can load more people into the box to stop the run, it's so tremendously helpful. But after Allen, who are the players that you would be most worried about going down for the Bills? Again, for me, I got Josh Allen, Tre'Davious White, Stephon Diggs, Matt Milano, Mitch Morrison, and John Feliciano. So I was interested to pick your brain on that.
Yeah, I have it very similar to you. I have Bills with Allen and Tre'Davious White, Stephon Diggs. I have Matt Milano up there. I have Tremaine Edmonds up there because of what we talked about earlier. Linebackers and defense. And I think that the Bills are already kind of playing with fire a little bit at the cornerback position because they've managed to kind of limp along with less than ideal athletes opposite Tre'Davious White for a couple of years now. And I think it works because Tre'Davious White's really good. And I think if you ask Levi Wallace to be cornerback 2, you can kind of hang on there as long as they don't target him a lot. And if you ask Dane Jackson to hang on, but if your starting quarterbacks are Levi Wallace and Josh Norman, I think that changes the dynamic of the defense quite a bit. So for me, I have Tre'Davious White at number 2, Stephon Diggs for obvious reasons at number 3. And then I have the linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, because we've seen what a linebacker-centric defense looks like without healthy linebackers.
That's fair. I would agree with that. Yeah, I started thinking Edmonds and his impact, and then I was thinking how much of a difference Feliciano made to the offense when he came through, and I think about how much Mitch Morse is such an anchor to that offensive line, but that's a good point there with the linebackers. In addition, again, bringing things full circle, as we like to do here on Disguise Coverage, to that linebacker-centric defense and how important the linebackers are in a McDermott defense, like you mentioned earlier. And so that was my number one. Following your number one, what's your number 2 thing that could potentially hold the Bills back in a playoff Super Bowl run here?
So my number 2 thing was Josh Allen getting hurt because of the drop-off between Josh Allen and Matt Barkley. That was my number 2. I was pounding the table this offseason to upgrade the backup quarterback situation. The Bills did not agree with me, and they spent a 5th-round pick on Jake Fromm instead. So
Jake Fromm is the next Drew Brees.
Yes, I heard that. Someone told me that. We're going to go ahead and just pass on that for right now. I think we could probably do an entire show on why Jake Fromm's not the next Drew Brees. So maybe at some point you'll have me back on and we'll talk about that.
I'd love
after we won a Super Bowl.
Right? After we celebrate it.
Yeah, after we celebrate a Super Bowl and we're all drunk on that, then we can talk about Jake Fromm. But I'm going to pivot now because we already talked about Josh Allen getting hurt and Matt Barkley. So I'm going to pivot right here. I can do it. I can be prepared. Randy says large asteroid. Absolutely. Right. That's a good one. I could go with that one.
I like
what
I'm going to go
with it. I'm going to go with a specific type of large asteroid. Okay. And that's the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh,
the Kansas City Chiefs are the other reason why the Bills, I'm literally making this up off the top of my head. I have 0 notes because I was not prepared. So here we go. We talk about this a lot when we talk about basketball, but we don't talk about it with football. How a really good generational player or team can end up kind of stifling a potentially good run from a different player or team in their similar conference. And we talk about that a lot with Brady and Manning until Manning broke through and won one. He was like, hey, is Brady going to kind of stop Manning from being able to get there? And in basketball, you talk about Jordan and those great Detroit Pistons teams and how those Pistons teams weren't able to get there to the championship and be able to win a couple rings because Jordan was there. And so Josh Allen has played great and the Bills are great. But if the Kansas City Chiefs are transcendent, if they're very, very, very good, if they're the type of team where they're in the AFC Championship game 3 out of every 4 years for the next decade, right? If that's where they're at, then their excellence can kind of minimize what the Bills are doing. Now, I don't know that we're there. The sample size for Kansas City is they had a MVP 2 years ago, right? And they won the Super Bowl with an MVP last year. It's not like Patrick Mahomes has already been dominant for 5 years and we've already established he's going to take over this conference for the next decade. We're not there yet. Now, we know he's very good, but the sample size isn't significant enough with Patrick Mahomes that we know he's always going to be so dominant in all iterations of the Kansas City team that the Bills aren't going to be able to push through. We don't know that. But it's just an idea at this point because the Bills could be a really, really good team. They could be the second best team in the league for the next 5 years and not win a Super Bowl because just the way that this, kind of scenario has played out in front of us. And so that's going to be my second thing. It was going to be Josh Allen getting hurt from Matt Barkley. I had to pivot. I don't know. How did I do, guys? Did I do okay? I mean, did I sound like I knew what I was talking about? Because that was literally just shooting from the hips. I have absolutely no notes. It's not in front of me. I'm just making it up as I go along.
That was good. I also think it's funny, again, that we are similar in our line of thinking in terms of what we think could impact the Bills. So that's funny. And what's also funny about this is I was flipping and flopping on my number 2 reason. And because I had 3, I knew I was picking 2. One of them was the Kansas City Chiefs. And I have notes here exactly to your point. Sometimes, and basketball is that great example, sometimes you just have teams that are just so good. Oh, and that's a great comment from Jeff there. Bruce is smart as hell. Bruce is smart as hell. That's one of the reasons I was super excited to have him on this show. And another comment for Bruce. Man, Bruce is fantastic. Well played, Bruce. That from Handsome Man. So you've got teams in certain sports. Your Jordan analogy was perfect. Jordan couldn't get through those Pistons teams. And then the Bulls eventually got up. And then you had God knows how many teams that couldn't get through the Bulls. You had the Knicks that couldn't get through the Bulls. And even the Pacers to a degree that couldn't get through the Bulls. And all these teams that were roadblocks and obstacles that couldn't be overcome. And the Chiefs, I know some of the comments in the chat were saying that the Chiefs are overhyped. Patrick Mahomes is fantastic. Again, to your point, I don't know if he's at that point where his level of dominance is so established because for all intents and purposes, there is still a degree of small sample size to what he's got going on. But the Chiefs are 1,000% an obstacle and a roadblock. And I think if they didn't exist in the AFC, I wouldn't have a problem saying the Bills are the favorite to come out of the AFC. The Chiefs have been wire-to-wire dominant in a lot of forms. Even the game they lost against the Raiders, they really almost pulled that one out. And I know they've had a couple of hiccups here and there, and they could have had a loss to the Chargers in week 2, and they had a hard-fought game against Denver towards the end of the year. And you can poke holes in them to a degree, but I think the Chiefs are a massive roadblock and a definite reason of what could potentially hold the Bills back. So I think it's funny that you mentioned that. I had some notes on that. My second reason, because this is easy for me to go to this now because you talked about the Chiefs, I'm not tremendously worried about it as I used to be earlier in the year, but the run defense. I saw some comments come through in the chat as well. I'm not here tremendously worried. I think if there was a weakness on this team overall, holistically, offense, defense, special teams, that run defense is one that is still sticking in my brain. But one thing I want to say, I don't want people to get confused with just the raw stats and focus on the raw stats. I saw some thoughts after the Patriots game when people were like, oh my goodness, like the Pats ran through us. They ran for 145 yards. Our run defense needs help. Yes, the Pats ran for 145 yards on us on Monday night, but majority of those yards came on about 3 chunk runs that were explosive runs. Second within that, the Patriots, where are my notes there? The Patriots had 201 total yards in that Monday night game. So they ran for 145, but they had 201 total yards. That is nothing. The Bills dominated. So if a team comes and runs for 175 yards, but they only put up 220 total yards, I'll take that. That's fine. But the run defense, I wanted a one tech at the trade deadline. I think a lot of us wanted a one tech at the trade deadline. And it's something that I would have liked a bit more shored up, and that I knew it wasn't a potential issue. One of the things I'm thankful for in this Colts matchup, which we're going to end this show on in a little bit when we talk about the Bills-Colts wildcard matchup, I like what the Colts do on offense in terms of it being a test for the Buffalo Bills. Their offensive line is very good. Going into last week, they had the third best run block grade in the NFL. Quentin Nelson is fantastic. Jonathan Taylor ran for 1,100 yards in December. This is an excellent opening test for the Bills' run defense, because the Colts are going to come in and they're going to try and run the ball. And no disrespect to Phillip Rivers or their passing game, but I don't think T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal and Michael Pittman Jr. are striking fear into the Bills' secondary. If they're going to move the ball, a significant chunk is going to be through the run game. And the Bills have had issues with their run defense for a significant portion of the year. So I want to see in this opening round, this opening wildcard game, okay, how do we handle the run? How do we handle Jonathan Taylor? It's a good running offense. It's a good running back. It's a good line. And it feeds into what I potentially think could hold the Bills back, which is that run defense. Because if you can't stop the run, I recognize it's a passing league, but it can be demoralizing to get run on. And especially if a team is doing it on you with consistency, it's a good way to control the ball. It's a good way to keep the ball away from a dangerous and potent Bills offense. And it puts more pressure on every single possession for your offense if you can't stop the run, because you're getting the ball less. And that would be my number 2 concern in terms of what could hold the Bills back.
Let's just wrap our head around the fact that other teams have to try to play keep away from Josh Allen and the Bills.
I know, right? I've been thinking all year.
Let's just take a moment to appreciate this.
It's really like a positive if you think about it.
And, you know, it's funny because every team who goes into the Bills game with an idea that, hey, we need to run the ball and control this, they're already playing with one hand behind their back. And because passing is more efficient. And so the reason why every single team out there either has their guy or is looking for their guy at the quarterback position is because they all know it's a passing league.
Yes.
They all know that being able to pass the ball effectively is more efficient and provides you with a higher probability of winning more games than being a good running team. If that wasn't the case, they wouldn't all be looking for franchise quarterbacks and giving them $40 million a year contracts. It's because they know that. And so the Colts are trying to manage as best they can right now with Jonathan Taylor, who has come on the last couple of weeks, and Phillip Rivers, who is a reasonable quarterback at this point. So I do think running the ball is a concern. However, when I look at specific games where the Bills made a concerted effort to stop it, the Tennessee game comes to mind. The Las Vegas Raiders come to mind. The Bills were able to minimize Derrick Henry. They were able to minimize Josh Jacobs. So it almost seems like the games where the Bills come in with that being their focal point, they were able to do it. They're just not able to do it as a byproduct of their defense because they don't have that one tech that you had previously mentioned. They don't have Star Lotulelei, and the backup one tech with Harrison Phillips has not been overly effective this year. Yeah. So because you don't have positionally the benefits that you had last year and that other teams have, in order to take that away, you have to take it away consciously. You just can't have it be taken away as a byproduct of people naturally playing their jobs. Yeah. So the question for me is, are the Bills going to come in with an idea that we are going to make that our focal point? I think that they will, but on games where they have, there has been some semblance of success. You just can't do that as a byproduct. It's not going to happen on its own. Right. You're not going to stop the run with the Bills as just sort of it just kind of happened. We didn't really plan it that way. It just sort of worked. I don't know. It wasn't really the plan, but because they don't have the horses for that. They don't have the position. You have Ed Oliver playing one tech and Quentin Jefferson rotating with him. That's not part of the plan. So because of that, it's not going to happen by accident. It's got to happen because you specifically chose it that way.
I think that's a fair assessment, and that's a good point and a comforting point that I like that you meant there. That you mentioned there. We went into that Raiders game thinking, okay, Josh Jacobs and this Raiders running game can't beat us, and we didn't let that happen. And we did the same thing with Tennessee, and then even the Kansas City game, we came in And I know that's the one that started out with everything being like, oh my God, we can't stop the run. But that's a good example to your point there. We went into that game thinking like, okay, we are not going to get beat deep. We're not going to get killed by the pass. We're going to make the Chiefs beat us with the run. We made a concerted effort in the other fashion, but we really limited the Chiefs passing offense and vertical options to a decent degree in that game. And if the Bills make a concerted effort, we could see success against defending that run and defending those things. Oh, appreciate that comment there. Guys, hit that like button.
Do it. All the cool kids are doing it. You know you want to.
Yeah,
peer pressure. Absolutely. Bullying, online bullying works. We've established that. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm online bullying you. All of you. Go hit the like. Make sure you subscribe to Cover One. Follow Anthony on Twitter. I mean, if you're really interested, I guess you could follow me too, I suppose. But
don't follow.
Really, I'm just trying to be as cool as Anthony. That's really what it boils down to. I actually went and got my hat and put it on backwards just so I could be as cool as Anthony.
That's so cool. I appreciate that. And I respect it because you're nowhere as cool as me, but it's cool that you're trying to.
I'm trying. I'm just trying to get to your level, dude.
Dude, I appreciate you so much for trying to get to my level. I mean, again, you're failing, but like, I appreciate you so much.
It's a valiant effort anyway.
It is a valiant effort. And that's all we care about. You know, participation trophies, valiant efforts. You still get one for trying.
Respect the process of trying to be cool, dude. Respect the process.
I should have just changed this episode to trying to be cool, dude. So as we start to wrap up this episode here of Disguise Coverage with Bruce and I, we started to talk about Jonathan Taylor. We started to talk about Phillip Rivers and the Indianapolis Colts. And in wrapping up this episode, again, the Bills have a playoff game this weekend in Super Wild Card Weekend where there is 74 wild card matchups to watch. So that's exciting. What are you looking for in this game, Bruce, and the cards falling how they did where the Bills ended up with the Colts? What do you think? Pros, cons, likes, dislikes? Are you happy with this matchup? Are you worried for certain things? What are your overall thoughts and feelings as we head into Wild Card Weekend with the Bills versus Colts?
Well, as Jeff Danger said in the comments, because I'm wearing a wizard hat, obviously I'm gonna take off my wizard hat, put on my professor hat, and I'm gonna say the thing that I am looking for is time to throw from Phillip Rivers. That is a big deal to me. And one of the things I think is interesting about Phillip Rivers is we know that he throws to his running backs a lot. We know that. We know that Nyheim Hines manages to lead the entire Indianapolis Colts team in receptions as a split carry running back, which is highly unusual. Let's just say that. But it's not what you think it is. These things that Phillip Rivers is throwing to these running backs aren't necessarily checkdowns in the traditional sense. There's a lot of swing passes, and it's the speed at which he gets it to them that matters. Phillip Rivers works through his progressions quickly. And because of that, when he decides to make that throw, he's making the throw to Jonathan Taylor or Nyheim Hines or Jordan Wilkins. He's making those throws at a specific time where the gap between that person and the defender covering them in the flat is still significant enough that you can count that as being in space. And that's how you can generate 5-7 yards at a clip from these things, essentially giving you a second prong to your run game. Because it's not like he throws it to them as a last resort when he's checking down, bailing out of a pocket. That's not the way he does it. He throws them to him because he is specifically getting through his progressions quickly and identifying the fact that, okay, this isn't going to work. I'm going there right now. And so what I want to see from Phillip Rivers is I want to see him hold the ball.
Yes.
So I am a member of coverage being better than pass rush. I don't know if we talked about this before, but there's a coverage versus pass rush debate that rages in the football film and analytics community. I am a coverage more important than pass rush guy. This is one of those times where that happens. The vast majority of sacks that take place in the NFL occur after 4 seconds. That means that the reason they got there wasn't because your pass rush necessarily got there fast. It was because the quarterback was forced to hold the ball. What is it that forces the quarterback to hold the ball? Coverage. Therefore, what I want to see from Phillip Rivers, because Phillip Rivers is one of those players who, you know, his passer rating under 2.5 seconds in the pocket is over 100. It's 17th in the NFL. His passer rating when forced to hold the ball for 2.5 seconds or more is 27th in the NFL. You want him to hold the ball. So whatever tricks you've got, Leslie Frazier, in your bag on the back end with rotating safeties and disguising coverages, see what I did there? Disguise coverage? Yeah, that's right. I did it. I brought that specifically to this podcast, and I want literally all the credit for it. I brought the point to disguise coverage to the podcast and live show called Disguise Coverage. That's my key. That's my one big key, and I'm closing it with that. That's the key against Phillip Rivers. It's disguising your coverage. Boom! Mic drop.
I have notes and thoughts, but I don't want to say anything else. I just want to end it with that comment from PJ. Bruce, you are cool now. Yeah, that was really good. Well played. That made me red from laughter. Oh man, well done. I don't know how to follow that. I like that point a lot. I believe. In doing research for this game, I believe Phillip Rivers is top 5 in terms of time to throw, in terms of lowest amount of time to throw from snap to release. I believe he's at 2.5. Yep. We spoke about it a lot on this show when it came to the Steelers-Bills matchup, how the Steelers wanted to work everything underneath and how Ben Roethlisberger was getting rid of the ball in 2.3 seconds and that quick release. And it's similar with Phillip Rivers. And the challenge with Phillip Rivers as well, much like it is with Ben Roethlisberger, but I would say maybe even more so with Phillip, is he's seen – I said Phillip because we're on a first-name basis. We've seen Phillip Rivers see so much throughout his career, and he's got a decent amount of knowledge in that head of his and his ability to read defenses. And I was literally going to say, you have to be able to disguise your coverage against him. Can you confuse him? Can you do something – to your point, that can just make him hold that ball for an extra 1 second, 1.4 seconds? Can you do something to throw him off his mark, to disrupt the timing between him and his wide receivers? Can you do something that just throws a mini wrench into their plans and allow that defensive line, which I know the sacks haven't been there holistically for the Bills, but their pressure rates and their pass rush win rate has been good. Can you do some things to get into his face and cause problems? And what we've seen down the stretch from the Bills defense, that aggressiveness, that blitz percentage, Bills are 8th in the NFL in blitz percentage, blitzing 36% of the time, showing that double A gap pressure. What can you do, exactly your point, with your safeties, with your coverage unit as a whole? What can you do to make Phillip Rivers hold on to the ball? That is my second biggest key for this game. My first biggest key is Jonathan Taylor in that running game, which we already talked about. And then I'd also like to see that Colts defense, which I don't think the Bills offense is a good matchup for the Colts defense, although I do respect the Colts defense, but just making sure you limit the studs they have on that defense. DeForest Buckner is a stud. Darius Leonard is a stud. They've got quality pieces on that defense. They have a good defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus, and he also has a fun name. That's a fun thing to say. It sounds like a wizard to go along with your wizard hat that you're wearing over there, Bruce.
Maybe I'm Matt Eberflus.
You could be. Oh, that would be awesome. You could be. For all we know.
Plot twist, baby.
Spoiler alert. That's all I'm gonna do, in talking about this episode and promoting it on social media and everything. I'm just gonna be had a great conversation with Matt Eberflus, and then everyone's gonna be like, what? And they'll key into the end of this episode and realize that you, Bruce Nolan, are Matt Eberflus. And it's a great way to keep your identity secret, because nobody's gonna think Matt Eberflus is out here talking about the Bills. Yeah, Bills podcasting multiple times a week.
It's the ultimate disguise.
It's the ultimate disguise. You're a very smart man. And yeah, I think limiting what their studs can do on defense, I think those are the 3 keys to go along with what you said there. And I don't want to give predictions. So if you came with prediction, I apologize. I am very superstitious. As it says in my Twitter bio, I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious, but that's just an office reference. But I am very superstitious. So I don't like to give predictions. I don't like to jinx anything. So we're not going to give predictions for the Bills versus Colts wildcard matchup, but we're able to give you a bit of a peek into what to look for in this game and the pros and cons and what's needed in order to get a victory for the Buffalo Bills. And with that being said, we're going to start to wrap up this episode. That's why it says toodles, you guys. As the regular listeners and watchers of this show know, I love saying toodles. I think it's fantastic. I think it needs to be used more in everyday vernacular. And I want to thank Bruce, you, for coming on and working that disguise coverage reference in at the end. That genuinely made me laugh and threw me off course big time. So well done to you. But just in general for coming on, being a great guest and knowing as much as you do and really adding a tremendous element and enhancing Bill's social media and Bill's Twitter, and everything you do with your pod and what you brought to the show was great. And tell the people, where they can find you and what you do every week and what you're about, and, how you manage to do Bill's podcasting while also being the defensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts.
Well, organization is the key, I think, to that. That's definitely the most important thing. Thank you so much for having me, Anthony. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to do this. I've been a fan for a while. We talked about that before we got started here. I've been a fan for a while, and I appreciate everybody in the comments. Your kind words really mean a lot to me. And you guys, the podcasting community, the content creators, the Bills media, the Bills fans, the Mafia has been unbelievably gracious to me. So the fact that I get to keep doing this, and the fact that people want me to come on their shows and talk, and it is truly staggering. So it means a lot to me, and I just really appreciate you being there for me and having me on. And it's been kind of a rough week for me. So this has been a nice reprieve for sure. But I will tell you this. My name is Bruce Nolan. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Bruce Exclusive. I am a member of the Buffalo Rumblings community. My show, The Bruce Exclusive, drops every Thursday and Friday mornings on the podcast feed app of your choice.
It's a great way to plug yourself. Again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to everybody in the comments, especially. I recognize we weren't able to get to every comment that came through. The chat was flooded tonight with great comments and thoughts and interaction between everybody. I, again, of course, am Anthony. I'm your host here on Disguise Coverage. Follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, ANT. Please like and rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage and all the other Cover One content. Go check out Bruce's feed on Twitter at Bruce Exclusive. And if you haven't checked out the Bruce Exclusive podcast on Buffalo Rumblings, you are doing yourself a disservice. Give Bruce a follow on the old Twitter and on the old Instagram. Check out the pod, rate and subscribe to that as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight, live with us, riding with us on this episode. Thank you to everybody who's listening to this episode after it went live, audio-only platforms, YouTube, video streams, whatever. Tremendous thank you to everyone, as always. Tremendous thank you again to Bruce, someone who I tremendously respect and value in this Bills content creation and analysis community. We will see you guys next week. Go Bills, and stay safe.